Hey y'all, Tracy here with Just Dig It Farms. Welcome back to our seed starting masterclass. Today is part 3 and we're going to be talking about how to develop your seed starting schedule. There's a few things that I think we need to have a good understanding of before we get into developing your seed starting schedule. The U.S. Hardiness Plant Zone Map is basically a map of the United States that they've taken and divided it up into regions based on their lowest average temperature that they get in that region. It's basically just a guide for gardeners to help them determine what perennials, what shrubs, what trees that they can grow in that region that will survive their winters. This is basically something that we just go by here in the United States. And in the 1960s, the Department of Agriculture took years and years of weather data and divided that up into regions based on the lowest average temperatures. It's been updated over time based on the weather data that they retrieve, and we recently, this past year, had a new update. It really didn't affect me personally a whole lot here in central Alabama. We went from a zone 8 to around a zone 8B. So what does it mean, zone 8A and 8B? That's basically where they just take it and they split it in half based on 5-degree increments instead of 10-degree increments. Whenever you're going to a garden center, there should be labels in their plants that they have for sale. And on that label, it should say hardy to zone 8 or 6 or 9 or whatever. It should have that on the plant label to guide you as the gardener to whether that plant is going to survive in your area or not. For example, a few months ago when I was at Petals, I bought a Turk's cap. It's a pink Turk's cap, and I've never seen a pink one before. I've always seen the red one, so I was really excited to see that. Now, on my plant label, it said hardy to zone 9. Well, I'm 8B. So what that's telling me is that plant will survive the winters in zone 9. But for me, it's probably not going to survive my winter. But I can still grow that as an annual. To find out your hardiness zone, you can just Google USDA plant hardiness zone, put in your zip code, and it'll tell you exactly what growing zone you are. Now, knowing your growing zone is very, very helpful as a gardener, but what it basically concerns is perennials, shrubs, trees. It's just telling you if those are going to survive the winter and come back the next year in your area. Now, when we're talking about growing our vegetable gardens, most of those things that we're going to be growing are annuals. So they're going to grow, develop their foliage, produce their fruit. We're going to harvest their fruit and their life's going to be over anyway. So your growing zone really doesn't pertain to growing your annual vegetables or annual herbs or even annual flowers like pansies and violas I have planted right now. My growing zone really doesn't have much to do with that because they're going to die out when it gets hot anyway and their life's going to be over. Now, concerning herbs, there's a lot of herbs that are perennial herbs, and I'm going to be growing those from seed as well. So knowing my hardiness zone concerning those perennial herbs that I'm going to be starting is important because, like, if we just take, for instance, lemon balm. Lemon balm is hardy from zones 5 and above. So I know that I'm going to be safe. I can grow lemon balm and it's going to come back year after year after year. But Spilanthes, or toothache plant, is hardy from zones 9 to 11. So it's not going to come back next year for me. I can still grow it. I can grow it as an annual and I can harvest it and use it and make medicine out of it and then replant it again next year because it's not going to survive my winter. So if you're starting some seeds that are perennial plants, it's very helpful to know your growing zone for those. The key thing for you to know when you're starting your annual seeds is you need to determine your first and last frost date. You need to know when your estimated last frost date is so that you can know when you can start planting your garden and you won't have another frost that's going to come in and kill it. And you need to know that date because if you're starting seeds indoors, that will tell you how many weeks before that last frost date you need to start those seeds so that those plants will be established and developed and ready to go in the ground as soon as your last frost is over. To find out your first and last frost dates, you can go over to the Farmer's Almanac or just Google it, put in what are my first and last frost dates, put in your zip code, and it will tell you when your first and last estimated frost dates are, and it will give you your growing days. So it'll tell you how many days that you actually have that you can grow between frost. Now I say estimated frost dates because our last frost date is March 17th. But we usually always have a couple of freezes after March 17th. We have them up until Easter usually. Like my pawpaw and Jean's dad, they never planted their gardens until Good Friday because they wanted to make sure there is no possibility of another freeze. So even though you have your estimated frost date, keep in mind what usually happens in your area every year. What do you usually have a frost into April or into May or whatever? Keep that in mind. And it's always really, really helpful to talk to other gardeners, talk to master gardeners, talk to old timers who's been gardening their whole life and see what they tell you because they're usually right. And once you've determined your first and last estimated frost dates, you can start developing your seed starting schedule. Once you've determined your first and last frost dates and you have them wrote down on your calendar, the next thing you need to do is decide what you want to grow. We talked about this a little bit in the last video, part 2, so you can go back and watch that if you haven't seen it yet. But we talked all about how to decide what you want to grow. First of all, you want to choose a variety that you and your family are definitely going to eat. Don't give space in your garden to something that you're not even going to eat. Second, you need to ask yourself the question, what do you want to do with this food? Do you want to just grow enough to eat fresh? Do you want to make salsa? Do you want to make pickles? Do you want to can? Do you want to ferment? Do you want to freeze dry? What do you want to do with the food? Because that could help you determine what you need to be growing. If you want to make a whole lot of salsa and spaghetti sauce, you might need to grow a whole lot of tomatoes. And you always want to try just a few things that you've never tried before, just to keep things exciting and interesting. Once you've decided what you want to grow, then you need to order your seeds. Now this is the fun part, thumbing through all the seed catalogs and looking at all the beautiful seed packets and beautiful things, delicious things to grow. But if you've got that list of what you definitely want to grow, then order those things first, your tried and true or the things that are on your list, order those seeds first. And then go back and if you've got space in your garden, add some of those other beautiful, exciting new things or new varieties that you want to add. I have found over the years, if I don't have my list of what I absolutely need and I start getting into those seed catalogs, I end up with so many things and I don't even have the things that I really needed or wanted to grow. So I recommend that you make that list first of what you want to grow this year. Go through your seeds, we talked about how we organize these seeds yesterday. Go through all of your seeds, see what you need, see what you're missing that you need, write those down, order those first, and then go back and order something new and fun. Now, something else that I do, and I didn't share this with y'all in the last video, I forgot, but I keep all of my seeds in my office closet. I also have, I don't have it in here with me, but I also have in the closet by these a basket that has a notebook and a pen in it, and in the beginning of the year it's an empty basket. I use that basket for empty seed packets. Whenever I finish sowing all of these seeds, I'll put this seed packet in that basket. I might make a little note on it like, I really love this variety did not do well for me. You know, I might make a little note on it, but I throw them all in that basket. And then at the end of the year, I've got this basket full of empty seed packets that I can grow through them and determine which ones I want to regrow again and which ones I want to reorder. And that makes it really, really easy. Also in that basket I have, or by that basket, I have a notebook and a pen. And I write down, if I come across a variety that I know I definitely want to try next year because somebody's recommended it to me, or I've tried it somewhere and I definitely want to try to grow it, it's something new, then I'll write that down on that notebook and I'll have that for next year. because by the time a whole year has gone through, I'm gonna forget all about that. And this notebook is where I might make a few notes about different things that I've tried or that I wanna try. So that's really, really helpful to have that when you're ordering your new seeds for the year. Now that you've ordered your seeds and you've got them all in and they're so beautiful and you're so excited about them, now the fun part starts. So you need to look at each thing that you're growing and determine how many weeks do I need to sow this seed indoors before my last frost date, so that by the time my last frost date comes, this is already going to be a pretty good established little plant that I can go ahead and plant in the ground. Some of the seed companies put that information on the back of their seed packet, like Baker Creek has on here. Planting instructions start indoors 4 to 8 weeks before your last frost, or so outdoors after your frost. So they tell you on this seed packet that this seed should be sown 4 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. Now you have your last frost date wrote on your calendar here. So for my nasturtium seeds, let's see, so my last frost date is March the 17th, right here. I want to sow these 4 to 8 weeks before last frost date, so I'm gonna probably sow these 6 weeks before my last frost date. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my last frost date and I'm gonna count back 6 weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this on February the 4th tells me when I should start sowing my nasturtium seeds if I want to do them 6 weeks before my last frost date. Then I write on February the 4th to sow my nasturtium seeds. Now some of the seed packets doesn't have that information on the back of it, like Hoss. Their seed packet says when to plant is early spring and fall. So what that's just telling you is when you can direct sow these seeds outside in your garden, in the ground. But to find out when to sow these indoors before your last frost date, you can go over to their website and they have a detailed printout of everything that you need to know to start this seed, and you can get the information right there. So at first it's going to be a little bit of work for you to figure out on each thing that you're growing how many weeks you need to start this indoors before your last frost date. But the really cool thing is once you have that information, you pretty much have it. It's pretty much done for you, because like my estimated first and last frost dates are pretty much the same every year. Might be different by a day or two, but it's always pretty much the same. So I can, once I figure out when to grow what and have it on my calendar, I pretty much have it and I pretty much know. And then you can just build upon that as you start growing new and different things. Now, one other thing that I do, and I showed you this on my last video, is on my little seed containers, I'll also put a little label that tells me when to sow these seeds as well, direct sow and indoors. I've just found the more available that you can have that information to you, the easier it is when you go to start your seeds. The reason I like to start seeds indoors is because I can get a jump start. I can get a jump start on my growing season. And that's important. Now I have about 238 growing days, but that would really be important for some of you who may be further north and you don't have as many growing days as I do. So you want to go ahead and get a head start and get those plants established and ready to plant by the time the ground warms up and you can plant. Another reason why I like to sow seeds indoors is because I have more control over that seed and that plant. When seeds are just sown in my garden, I don't have near as good of a germination rate as I do whenever I start my seeds indoors because of so many different things. Dogs, trampling, rain washing them away. You know, there's all different kind of issues. But when I sow seeds indoors in my trays, I have way more control over that seed germinating and then nurturing that seed into a healthy little plant start to plant in my garden. Another idea that I think is a great idea, I haven't done it yet because it's going to take some work and some time, but I think it's an awesome idea. you can take each little, if you're organizing your seeds like this in these photo storage containers, you can take each individual seed container, and on the inside of this container right here, you could put you a little label, a sticky note, whatever, tape it to it, that has all the information that you need to know about growing this seed. So it would be information like, should these seeds be cold stratified before they're planted? What is cold stratification? It's a process of exposing the seed to a cold and moist environment to get that seed to germinate. See, some seeds need cold temperatures before they'll germinate. So that's cold stratification. So if you've got a seed like, say, echinacea, I know it's one that needs to have some cold temperatures before it'll germinate. Well, if it needs 4 weeks of cold temperatures and moisture before it'll germinate, then you need to make sure, if you're supposed to sow that seed 6 weeks before your last frost date indoors, and it needs 4 weeks in cold and moist temperature, then you need to have that seed in a cold, moist environment 10 weeks before your last frost date. So that would be very helpful information to have on this seed box. Or maybe this seed needs scarification, which is just where you nick the seed and you soak it in water before you plant it to help it to germinate quicker. And some seeds require that. Some seeds do better with that process. So maybe that should be wrote on this little label that you have inside your seed packet. That would be very helpful to have that information at your hand when you're sowing these seeds. Also, it'd be helpful to know how many days that seed needs to germinate. Or does that seed need light or darkness to germinate? So all of that is very important information that you need to know when you're sowing each individual seed. And I think it would be super, super helpful to have that right here on this seed container, so that when you go to your greenhouse to sow these seeds, everything you need to know is right here. And you don't have to Google it, you don't have to go back to your notes, you don't have to look it up. It's all right here at your fingertips. Now, I haven't taken my seed starting system to that level yet, but I sure hope to do it because I think that would be a really good thing to do. So once you've done all of your homework and you've figured out how many weeks before your last frost date to sow each seed indoors, and you've got that wrote down on your calendar, then all you've got to do is put this calendar in a place where you see it all the time. And you'll know on this day I'm supposed to sow lettuce, spinach, chard. You can go over to your box, just pull out your lettuce, spinach, and chard, take it to the greenhouse with you, sow your seeds. If you're really smart and you've got all your information in here, it'll be so much easier for you. And with this calendar, you won't miss your sowing dates and be behind. And like I said, once you've done all of your homework and you've figured out when to sow what seed and you've got it all wrote on your calendar and you've got your seeds all organized, once you've done it, you've done it. The system is in place and all you've got to do is just build upon it each year as you add new things. Okay, y'all, that is it for today's video, but y'all stay tuned for part 4 of our seed starting masterclass, which will be my top 10 seed starting supplies that you will need to help you successfully grow your seeds. God bless you, and I will see y'all on the next video.